You're watching Obama in Springfield. The President returns. A News Channel 20 special report.
Welcome back to News Channel 20 special coverage of President Barack Obama's return to the capital city. Stacey Skryzak joining us here on the desk. And Stacey, you've been watching for the past several minutes as the president landed, arrived, made his way to the Capitol. What are your impressions so far?
I had chills. Pretty amazing to see Air Force One touchdown at Lincoln Capitol Airport. Pretty amazing seeing Governor Bruce Rauner there, Senator Dick Durbin greeting them, and just really amazing day. It's a historic day for here in Springfield, Illinois, as well as the state legislature. Special
any time to get the president to visit, of course. We know his time is in demand and so difficult to get him here. What I keep thinking about is the logistical nightmare, so to speak, that we've gone through here, and every outlet has gone through the planning. We know the city of Springfield has been heavily involved. As we take a look back, again, this was about 45 minutes ago. This is a look at Air Force One touching down at Abraham Lincoln Capitol Airport. The president does this every single time he goes somewhere. There's a city that is doing this every single time the president goes somewhere. It's a logistical, you really need to work together, obviously, and that's
definitely. And a lot of Secret Service, a lot of the motorcade itself. I saw dozens of vehicles as they were taking off from the airport, making their way through Springfield. Just a beautiful sight.
Yeah, it's been pretty neat. So iconic to see this airplane, whether it's in posters, publicity shots, you see it on the news, and now finally it is at Abraham Lincoln Capitol Airport right now, either taxiing on the runway or in a hangar. So the focus is right here on the capital city.
And throughout this afternoon, we're about an hour away from President Obama's speech to the General Assembly. But throughout the afternoon, we have a whole crew of live reporters. We have Eric Feldman at the airport. Brendan Cullerton's been downtown checking in with the detours, the road closures, and the atmosphere downtown. We've got Lindsay Hess over at the Hoagland Center, as well as Jen Sullivan making a appearance down there, and Jordan Abudayyeh, she is sitting in the media room at the state capitol getting ready to watch the speech. So we will be checking in with all of our reporters throughout the afternoon. But now we are going to take a look here, and we did hear that President Obama was making a little pit stop over at the feed store. Now that is right across the little alleyway to the old state capitol, which is very historic because that's where President Obama, then a U.S. senator, made his bid for the White House 9 years ago. So he made that announcement on the old state capitol steps, the same spot that Abraham Lincoln made a speech many years ago. Let's toss it over to Adam.
Well, Stacey, we'll check in just a moment here. Again, we are looking at what was video of Air Force One, joined on the studio by Dr. Kent Redfield, Professor Emeritus of Political Science at University of Illinois Springfield. Dr. Redfield, historic day for Springfield. Not the first time you've seen a president in the State House. We'll talk about that a little bit. But first, your impressions here of what you see as the president arrives.
Well, I think one has to be struck by both the complexity and then the majesty. I mean, it is the leader of the free world. That sounds trite, but that really is the case. And so it's always an event. And then when you get a president who is a native son, who served in the legislature, who announced his run for the presidency here, then that makes it all the more personal.
Absolutely. So many parallels between President Obama and Abraham Lincoln, and those parallels drawn by President Obama himself when he lived here in Springfield and, of course, announced his run back in 2007, 9 years ago to the day when he was on the steps of the old state capitol, evoking Abraham Lincoln in the very sentence when he announced his candidacy. What are your impressions of why the president chooses to make, or chose at the time, to make the big announcements, those big decisions right here in the capital city?
Well, I think anytime you can reference Lincoln, anytime you can use him as a context.
You're not going to get knocked for bringing up Abraham Lincoln,
no, and not just in Illinois, but I'm always struck by the international visitors that come to Springfield, that Lincoln really is international. And so if you can tie your political career and the things that you want to do to Abraham Lincoln, that is always a plus. It is not just that he's revered in Illinois or nationally, but he really is international.
Now, of course, the majesty, as you said, is one aspect of this visit. The cheering crowds, the throngs who were probably outside the feed store just dumbstruck as the president walked in for lunch. That'll be pretty neat to hear those stories. But the other thing about this visit is the meat of it. At 1:15 or 1:10, we will be checking in live with the president's address to the General Assembly. It's a very divided Illinois. That's an understatement. 222 days now without a state budget, the longest in history, as we've discussed many times, of this state. The president is coming back. Is his tail between his legs? Is he embarrassed? Is he here to motivate? What do you think the president is here to do?
Well, I think this is the beginning of the post-presidency. I mean, this is nostalgia. This is going back to your roots. And clearly, as he gave the State of the Union address, he was thinking about kind of, you know, not only what went right, but what went wrong. And he expressed real disappointment in his inability to change the nature of politics. In fact, he commented politics had gotten worse. And said, you know, maybe a FDR or a Lincoln would have been able to do better. And so clearly these are things that are on his mind. He wants to talk about how do you get a better politics, how do you get people engaged. And this may be a theme that he's going to adopt as he, 11 months from now, leaves office. It's always interesting to see what does a former president do? Is your role model Jimmy Carter or Bill Clinton? You know, how are you going to use the rest of your life? And this may be a window to that.
Dr. Ken Redfield, Professor Emeritus at University of Illinois Springfield, joining us here. And I was reading an article from Bloomberg earlier this week. They talk about the President Obama of 2009 versus the President Obama now. And the speechwriter for Obama at that time, for President Obama, John Favreau, talked about how they consciously made the decision to talk about partisan politics because they also wanted to consciously talk about their solutions. It hasn't worked out in the president's favor very often now with a very divided and right now Republican-controlled Congress. Is it difficult for some lawmakers, for some viewers, some listeners, some readers to hear the president talk about fixing Illinois if they're concerned about fixing Washington in the first place?
Well, I don't expect that the president is going to offer a magic solution to fix Illinois. And so certainly we need to deal with the immediate problems here. We need to deal with the immediate problems in Washington, D.C. But you're not going to do that without changing the nature of the politics, without getting people engaged. And so, regardless of what you think of what the job the president has done, these are clearly things that need to be addressed, that we need a better politics, that we need to get people engaged. And if he's able to add something to that going forward, then that will be a contribution. But there's certainly, given the way things worked out, there certainly is a huge contrast between what he hoped to do and the nature of politics as he's leaving office.
Much of what you say, we could replace President Obama with Governor Rauner, and I think address a lot of the issues in Illinois right now as they're facing some of the similar issues, a divisive General Assembly right now. Those leaders that are sitting there, the General Assembly that's sitting there waiting for the president to address them shortly, excited no doubt, nervous perhaps, but are they going to be receptive, do you think, to the message that they hear from President Obama? Or is this a nice stop along his farewell tour, so to speak, and then it's back to business as usual, which unfortunately for 7.5 months hasn't been much business?
Yeah. And I suspect there will be a day of good feeling, but we're going back to business as usual until we can get some kind of resolution. And right now it is a stalemate. There's nothing the president can do. If you brought Lincoln back from the grave, he would not change the dynamic in Springfield. And so the hope is that there'll be some people will take some of the sentiments going forward to, how do we get to not addressing individual leaders, lawmakers' particular concerns, but the needs of the state, because that's really what needs to be done.
Dr. Ken Redfield joins us here. We will be checking in with you a little bit later in the show. We appreciate your time, and we will have a couple more personal thoughts, I think, which would be great to hear as you sat in that chamber hearing from a president several years ago. So we'll be checking back. Thanks again.
Certainly.
We're going to send it back to break here. We'll be back in just a moment with more special coverage of President Barack Obama's return to Springfield right here on News Channel 20.
You're watching Obama in Springfield. The President returns. A News Channel 20 special report.
Welcome back to News Channel 20. Stacey Skryzak, Adam Rife here, anchoring our coverage so far of President Obama's return to the capital city. Again, just great to see all the festivities so far surrounding that, but we will get into the teeth of the visit a little bit later. We did talk briefly before the break. The president made a lunch stop we didn't expect.
He did, and that's part of the tricky part for the media is we don't know, we don't have much access. So we're relying heavily on our phones, on Twitter, on social media, and sure enough, he made a stop at the feed store. I wonder if that's a place that he visited during his tenure here.
This is a look right now from a picture we received on Twitter that shows the president just chatting up a couple folks who are having a nice lunch there. We're told the president got takeout at the feed store, so this is a nice picture of the stop.
I heard you and Jen earlier, so maybe it was broccoli cheddar soup. That is delicious there.
They've got the cream-based soups that are just fantastic.
Yeah,
It's also the broth-based, but we'll get into the menu a little bit later. Again, we do have some video of the president's stop that we're working to get into the show in just a bit, so we will take a look at that as soon as we can. The president making a lunch stop. For more on that, we're going to check in with News Channel 20's Brett Baldeck on the phone right now. And Brett, what can you tell us about the president's pit stop?
We're heading to the feed store right now to try and catch up with a couple of people, but I can talk a little bit about when the president landed. Coincidentally enough, I was in the parking lot of the airport waiting for some equipment from one of our crews, and I look off to my left, and there goes the Air Force One landing, and literally as soon as those wheels touched down on the ground, all of the roads surrounding the airport and along the motorcade route were closed, so I was unable to get back to my live position, but I was able to catch up to the motorcade along Carpenter, and I believe it was Walnut Street, and there was one man standing there getting video with his phone. I was getting video as well for our newscast, and he mentioned to me he was just amazed at how quickly the motorcade went by. Within about, I'd say, 30 seconds, all 35 to 40 vehicles were through and on their way to the Capitol. I will mention that there were a lot of people at the airport, in the airport parking lot with their lawn chairs, watching Air Force One land, even though we were told that it would be closed to the public. Obviously, some people tried to take advantage and just waited out into the airport parking lot and were able to see Air Force One land. We did see several choppers over the Springfield area today. They were scanning the skies, making sure everything was okay. They were low flying around the airport and over towards the St. John's Hospital area. And anyone that is trying to catch the motorcade this evening, my best piece of advice for you is police are reminding everyone not to park along the side of the road. We had to move our line truck several times. So again, if you're hoping to catch the motorcade this evening, you're going to want to try and find a parking lot near the airport in some type of business. You're going to want to be off the roadway because they will ask you to move. But again, we did see Air Force One land, and as soon as it did that, all of the roads shut down from the airport and into downtown Springfield. So
all right.
That's it for now. I'll send it back to you guys.
Thank you. That's Brett Baldeck reporting from out and about in Springfield right now. Again, we're not encouraging people to go track down the motorcade, certainly not in a car, as Secret Service will have, along with Springfield Police, that stuff blocked off. But if you do want to catch a glimpse, Brett's saying people in lawn chairs, even in this temperature, trying to see a very rare opportunity to see the President of the United States.
Yeah, pretty exciting. And he is here for a purpose, and we want to toss it to Jordan Abudayyeh.
On January 19th, Senate President John Cullerton sent a letter to President Obama suggesting now would be a good time to return to the Capitol where it all started. In a statement today, Cullerton said, quote, President Obama's State of the Union address struck a chord with its call for more civil politics and working to find areas of agreement. Clearly, that's what we need here, end quote. The senator who replaced Obama in the state Senate says he thinks the president would be embarrassed about the state of Illinois right now. He hopes his message will resonate with lawmakers.
I think it's important for him to come deliver the same type of message he delivered to me my first day in Springfield, where he said it's important for you to reach out to people on the other side of the aisle and reach to people in different parts of the state and get to know one another and learn about your commonalities and work through your differences.
Other Democrats say they're just excited to be a part of the historic event.
It's a very humbling experience and such an honor to be the person who happens to be elected for my district that gets to sit in the chair and be that close to current president.
Even Republicans are optimistic about the president's message.
We're at a critical moment in our state's history, and so anything that can help break up that logjam, I would support. So I'm looking forward to his message. I hope his message speaks to both the Democrats and the Republicans in the Illinois House and Senate, and to the governor, and I'm hopeful that it can help move the ball forward.
All right, a lot of lawmakers there. That was from a week ago, getting ready for the president's visit.
Yes, and moments ago we we showed you pictures of President Obama at the feed store. Here we do have some video from our ABC affiliate of their Senator Dick Durbin and President Obama.
There's the president. Again,
yes.
This is not
Earlier.
live. This is earlier. This is from the pool feed. Again, one camera assigned to travel with the president. And that's not only for security purposes, but to cut down on a few logistics. There's woman shaking hands with the phone in hand.
I think a lot of people surprised. He also did take a few moments as he walked outside to shake hands with people along the plaza, the old state capitol plaza, which is also symbolic because that is where he announced his candidacy for the president 9 years ago.
Right, I think a symbolic gesture as well. So President Obama stopping at the feed store. There was video there, of course, of his stop, as saying hello to the folks who work there, as well as some diners that may not have anticipated that. So again, a whole lot of coverage here on President Barack Obama's visit to the capital city. Right now, he is at the State House meeting with a few of his former colleagues. He's preparing to address Illinois lawmakers and discuss the budget impasse, if not in specifics, in general terms of how they can work together perhaps and make things better in Illinois. We'll continue our coverage after the break. Stay with us.
You're watching Obama in Springfield. The President Returns, a News Channel 20 special report.
And welcome back. You are taking a live look at the Illinois State Capitol. A beautiful day here in February. Very cold, and President Obama already inside preparing for his speech to the General Assembly in less than an hour.
That's right. We're told he is scheduled to meet with 11 former colleagues in the Illinois State Senate. Those who worked with him when he was a state senator from 1997 to 2004. Again, President Obama preparing a speech in about 40 minutes or so. And we continue our coverage all afternoon long of the president's visit. We saw him stop for lunch. We saw him arrive, of course, at the Abraham Lincoln Capitol Airport. He is here for a reason, and we're going to listen now to Governor Bruce Rauner last week talking about what he expects and what he's hoping to hear from the president as he addresses not only the governor, but also the General Assembly. Take a listen.
President Obama has come out strongly in favor of both term limits and redistricting reform. Just 2 weeks ago, at his State of the Union address, President Obama pressed for nonpartisan redistricting reform, saying we have to end the practice of drawing our districts so that politicians can pick their voters and not the other way around. I agree, and the president and the people of Illinois agree.
Again, that's Governor Bruce Rauner at the State of the State address at the end of January, evoking President Obama's name. That was before we knew the president would arrive. So looking back, wondering if the governor knew President Obama would be on the way, talking about term limits, talking about gerrymandering districts, something that President Obama has spoken outwardly about both. And at the state level, we know the president will address them, but there are a lot of local leaders here that are hoping to hear something that they like from President Obama.
Earlier today, we saw Mayor Jim Langfelder, heard from him too. Eric Feldman interviewed him before Air Force One arrived, talking a little bit about what he hopes to hear today. Let's take a listen.
We really appreciate Barack Obama remembering his roots. He used to practice at the state capitol, of course, and then at the old state capitol. So there's great crossover with regards to that significance to Springfield, and we appreciate his recognition of Springfield and the part of his life.
All right, that is Mayor Jim Langfelder reacting earlier this week to the news that President Obama would be coming to the state capitol. He was one of those who met him at the airport on the tarmac, shook his hand, and then was part of the motorcade. I don't believe Mayor Langfelder was in the presidential limo with President Obama, but he was part of that extensive motorcade that works its way to the state capitol. And it's got to be fascinating, an interesting little piece of real estate here in Springfield, working with the governor and now the president.
Yeah, and we're going to toss it out to our Brendan Cullerton. He's been tracking downtown First and Moreau, checking out things, the atmosphere as the motorcade was coming near them, and also the roads that were closed. Brendan?
I'm still out here at First and Monroe. You can see the motorcade is still parked, lined up alongside the Capitol building here. All the security still in place, but the crowds are actually starting to thin out. As we'll go over this way, you can see just a few people lining the streets. Actually, more people on the streets at this point are protesting the president. They're unhappy about the job that he's done in the White House. So they're mostly what you can see here now is the streets still obviously blocked off. We are told that he will be exiting when he is done with his speech somewhere along that Monroe and 2nd Street, but it seems like we're getting a ton of misinformation from all different sorts of law enforcement, so I can't tell you anything for sure anymore. But for now, that's all I've got as an update. We'll throw it back into the studio and I'll see what I can get from the Secret Service Press Agency. Reporting live in Springfield, Brendan Cullerton, News Channel 20.
Thank you, Brendan. We're getting more information now out of Bernie Schoenberg, who's been designated as one of the Illinois press pool reporters on the president's trip. He was at the feed store and said the president spoke with a few, as we said, patrons. No plants here on the campaign trail, no good-looking people just to fit a demographic. These are folks who are just having lunch at the feed store, and they just chatted about the grandkids and what they were doing for the day.
I want to know if the kids there, if they realize the importance of this.
I got to speak with Jennifer Gill, the superintendent of District 186, earlier this week, and she said a lot of the older classes, civics classes, American history, obviously taking advantage of this opportunity to talk about the significance of this moment, some issues in state and national politics, and what they can do to learn more about it, how they can improve, and what the president may be speaking about.
It's a great way to learn a little piece of history that was happening right now.
For a current events teacher, it just falls right in your lap.
It sure does.
Yeah, that's a godsend.
Well, we want to hear from you. A lot of people along the route, a lot of people downtown. We heard Brett earlier saying people were taking video of the motorcade. Send all of that our way. You can email us. You can find us on social media. All you have to do, use the hashtag #PresidentReturns.
Perfect.
We want to hear from you.
All right, we're going to go to break. Be right back with more coverage of President Obama's trip to Springfield. Stay with us.
You're watching Obama in Springfield. The President Returns, a News Channel 20 special report.
Welcome back to News Channel 20 special coverage of President Obama's return to Springfield, a live look at the Illinois State Capitol. Stacey Skryzak, Adam Rife here on the desk right now. We saw before heading to break a live look from the floor of the House chamber as lawmakers in a joint session, the Senate and the House, they're convening and just waiting for the president to make his appearance. We expect that to be shortly. Of course, we will cover that in full right here on News Channel 20.
We will be watching it. And now this isn't President Obama's first return to Springfield.
Certainly since he's left as a state senator. He has come back a few times.
Yeah, we're going to take a look back at the history of his big visits here in Springfield.
Wonderful to be back in Springfield, especially when you're seeing all these good friends.
President Obama, no stranger in Springfield during his 7 years as a state senator from 1997 to 2004. President has made 3 high-profile returns since leaving the State House to become a U.S. senator. The first visit was on February 10th, 2007, 9 years to the day before this most recent visit.
In the face of war, you believe there can be peace. In the face of despair, you believe there can be hope.
On that frigid day, joined by his family in front of the old state capitol, the then senator formally announced he was running for president.
In the face of a politics that shut you out, that's told you to settle, that's divided us for too long, you believe that we can be one people.
Obama said then it was in Springfield where he saw all that is America converge, people clamoring to be heard. A year and a half later, in August of 2008, he announced on the same spot he'd picked a leader to join him on the presidential ticket.
I have come back to Springfield to tell you that I found that leader, and that man is Joe Biden.
Then on February 12, 2009, just weeks after he was sworn in as the 44th president, Obama once again visited Springfield to celebrate Abraham Lincoln's 200th birthday.
This man, our first Republican president, knew better than anybody what it meant to pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
And now, nearly 6 years later, President Barack Obama will return to the Illinois Capitol to deliver to state lawmakers what many expect to be a similar message of unity, albeit different in tone. We're joined now in studio by Ian Hunt, an historian with the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library Foundation. Mr. Hunt, thanks for joining us. Looking back on some of that footage from several years ago, a significantly younger President Obama, looking at least, and now he returns to address the State House and the General Assembly. This is certainly not the first time a president has done this. It's actually the fourth, or it will be the fourth momentarily. Let's look back, because there was a visit that was scheduled by a president to address the General Assembly that did not happen. Tell us about that.
President Ronald Reagan, in his first 100 days in office, had originally been scheduled to speak on April the 1st of 1981. It was believed that he would be addressing his economic policies, that he would be trying to get the nation behind his goals. Unfortunately, roughly 46 hours before the president was to land here in Springfield, he was shot by John Hinckley Jr. as he was exiting the Washington, D.C. Hilton Hotel after giving an address there. Originally, it was not decided to send anyone in his place. It was believed that the scheduled visit would be rescheduled for a later date, but unfortunately that never happened.
What is the significance of Illinois in the national landscape for President Reagan to choose Illinois to use that as I don't want to say soapbox, maybe correct me if I'm wrong here, but to launch those policies? Is there a significance in choosing Illinois?
Certainly Illinois was very important to Reagan. He was born here. He's the only president in our nation's history to be born in Illinois. Illinois is one of these states that if you can get it behind you, it's easier to get the other states to go along as well.
If we look back at the electoral maps, you have to go a long way to find the year when Illinois last voted red. I believe it was for President Reagan in 1984. It's been a significant time since then. Democrats since the state since then. Looking back past Ronald Reagan, we don't have to go far to the 1970s for the most recent actual trip by a sitting president.
That is correct. President Carter visited on May the 26th of 1978. Carter's speech was interesting in that he really kind of laid out all of the difficulties facing the nation. He spoke about everything from unemployment to welfare to the strategic arms limitations treaties that they'd been negotiating with the Soviet Union.
One, I believe women's rights was also big at the time.
That was his ultimate push towards the end of the speech, was trying to motivate the Illinois General Assembly to ratify the ERA amendment. At that time, 35 states had ratified it. It was unfortunately still 3 states short. And he was giving it his best effort to go out to the states to try to get them to support it.
Needing 75% of the 50 states to support it, trying to hit every single one. After Jimmy Carter, we go back in history, and there are 2 other visits that we have. Let's talk about those.
We do. The next one prior to Mr. Carter's was Herbert Hoover in June of 1931. Hoover's address to the General Assembly was almost an afterthought. He was here primarily for the dedication of the Lincoln Tomb, the rededication of the Lincoln Tomb. The speech that he gave that day was rather short. Basically, he outlined the idea that many of the grand concepts that the nation could support had originally begun as problems on the local level. They'd been hammered out by the state legislatures, and that's where most of the hard work needed to be done, was in the states.
When we go back to President William Howard Taft, the first president to address a sitting Illinois General Assembly, did he use it much as the last 3 presidents have for policy pushes, or was he much like Hoover, where it was not an afterthought but an address in general?
No, his was very definitely a policy push. He understood, he'd been trying to negotiate basically free trade with Canada. He came here to remind Illinois manufacturers that the costs of labor in Canada were roughly the same as the United States, so we had no fear of losing jobs to Canada, but that the agricultural growing season in Canada was so much shorter, and that Illinois corn, wheat, could be shipped north, that this would open up a huge bounty for Illinois farmers. He was really trying to get support for this notion of free trade.
Circling back to the significance of Illinois, it says something that in a city where Abraham Lincoln is so gargantuan, where the capital, the tomb, pardon me, where Lincoln's home, it's an easy campaign stop, so to speak, but the 3 of the 4 presidents who've been here already, we're aiming to do it for policy purposes, illustrates how important we are on the national stage, I think.
Absolutely.
Well, we appreciate you being here. Thanks so much. Obviously, I think from William Howard Taft to President Barack Obama, certainly some changes in not only how it's covered, but the momentum, the size of the occasion, don't you think?
Very much so.
All right. Ian Hunt from the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library Foundation. Thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it on this historic day. We're going to go to break. When we come back here on News Channel 20, more coverage of President Barack Obama's return to the state capitol as we inch ever closer to live coverage of his address at the Illinois General Assembly. Back in a moment. Stay with us.
You're watching Obama in Springfield. The President Returns, a News Channel 20 special report.
And welcome back. Thank you for joining us on this special report. I'm Stacey Skryzak alongside Adam Rife. We've been here all afternoon. We're going to continue to. We're about a half hour away or so, give or take, from President Obama's speech to the General Assembly at the Illinois State Capitol.
A whole lot of excitement surrounding the president's visit for several weeks now, and we are about a half hour away from the purpose of it. The reason for him being here is he'll step to the podium in the Illinois House chambers and address both senators and representatives. It's going to be interesting to hear what he says, interesting to hear the tone. We'll talk a little bit about that as we approach, including checking in with State House reporter Jordan Abudayyeh. Yes. She's at the Capitol and will be covering that for us. Before we get to that, we have a special opportunity here to hear from a senior advisor to President Obama, a woman native to Illinois, working closely with the president since he was a candidate. This is an interview that Evan Peterson was able to get with Valerie Jarrett, senior advisor to President Obama. Let's take a listen.
Here outside the state capitol to my left is Valerie Jarrett, the senior advisor for President Obama's administration. How are you doing today?
I am so excited to be back in Springfield. I was here 9 years ago on this day. It was even colder, if you can believe that, than it is right now, but our hearts were warm, and the President just arrived. He's so excited to have a chance to come back and be with some of his former colleagues and address the nation from Springfield, Illinois.
Right. Now, is this a political homecoming for President Obama coming back to Illinois?
Well, of course, I think it's really more than just a political homecoming. He has friends here on both sides of the aisle. He'll have a chance to build upon his remarks in the State of the Union, where he talks about the fact that really Springfield is a microcosm of our country, from farmlands to inner city, but where he was able to develop deep relationships with Republicans and Democrats and independents and actually do the people's business, and that we need to really work on that. He mentioned that, how important it was to break that political system that's been broken for so long, and how hard it would be when he spoke here 9 years ago, and he will continue that theme today.
Now, we heard in the President's State of the Union address that that's something he really wants to press upon for today's speech, is reaching across the aisle. What kind of message can we expect that he will be delivering to lawmakers who, in today's state, is so divided?
Well, unfortunately, Springfield is not the only state capital where we have these kinds of divisions. Washington has the same challenges, and so his message is to remind people about why they got into politics in the first place. What should we be doing to make it easier for people to vote? How can we get all of this money out of politics where a few people are affecting the outcome of an election rather than the American people? What can we do to make sure our districts actually represent the people and give them a voice?
What will that tone look like when he addresses the General Assembly?
Well, I think he'll have a chance to tell some stories about his days back in the General Assembly. There'll be funny stories. I think he is just so excited to be here and to reacquaint with some of his former colleagues again on both sides of the aisle. But I also think it'll be a speech about a challenge for all of us about what more can we do. He said in the State of the Union he's committed to continuing to work as hard as he can for his last 11 months to bring us together, and what better place to deliver that message than where he was first able to do it, right here in Springfield.
It's been 9 years since the president sat right here and said, I'm going to be running for the presidency, and now he's in the end of his administration and he's come back home. Is this significant to him and his administration?
Very much so. He has wonderful memories of Springfield. He has wonderful memories of representing Chicago in Springfield. That day he chose this location quite by intention to launch his campaign, and so it is a homecoming for him, and one that has us all very excited.
Now, he has, his visit has put some Republicans feeling that they are a little bit at odds with the president, feeling that they haven't been quite close to him as some of the Democrats have been. Any chance to make amends for those who feel that they've been kind of pushed aside?
Well, I think that his tone has never been one to push anyone aside. He's always spoke, since the day I met him nearly 25 years ago, about a big tent, an inclusive tent, where everyone's voices should be heard, where we can find that common ground. And just because you disagree on one issue doesn't mean you have to disagree on all. And there are good examples right now. Criminal justice, for example, is one where in Washington we're seeing bipartisan support from both sides of the aisle to move forward with something that's good for our country. So he is as optimistic about our country's future as he was 9 years ago when he made that announcement. So it's good to come full circle.
Now, he has the eyes of the state on him, from everyone from Chicago all the way down to Southern Illinois. For those who can't sit inside there and hear what he has to say, what should the citizens, the average Illinoisan, take away from his address?
The fact that we all have a responsibility to make our nation that more perfect union, that those who we elect have a real responsibility to engage the American people, make them a part of the process, and that we have made a great deal of progress over the course of our nation's history, but we still have hard work to do, and everyone can play a part in that.
Valerie Jarrett, Senior Advisor to President Obama, thank you so much for talking with us today.
Thank you. Get warm.
Thank you. For now, we're going to send it back to you all in the studio.
Okay, thank you.
Great work, Evan.
Very, very interesting information, and the theme, a message of unity,
sure.
which going across the party lines, across the aisle, something that he is going to build upon from the State of the Union.
We said this wasn't a campaign stop, but those talking points from Valerie Jarrett certainly sound like it. They were very thematic. Again, President saying he's not bringing a spending bill here for the state of Illinois. He's not bringing specific policies for them to sign off on. This will be a general discussion. It's nice to hear that they're going to have some fun anecdotes. We hope we get a lot of laughs here as he looks back, maybe some hazing of those former colleagues. But again, we are approaching the president's speech. We expect it within 20 minutes here. Of course, we'll carry the entire thing live.
Okay, and we want to toss it out live to News Channel 20's John Rieger, who is live downtown near the state capitol. John.
Stacey and Adam, right here in front of the state capitol, the president inside about a half hour away from addressing the General Assembly. You can still see some of the motorcade cars are in front of the capitol. You see the Secretary of State police officers still patrolling. They'll be on patrol and have been all morning. Now, of course, about when the president first arrived, the motorcade first arrived, there were about 100 or 150 so people here. It has thinned out now, but still some people are walking around having their afternoon walks or lunch breaks or whatever. We wanted to talk to some of the people that are here. Rachel, if you come in for a second. This is Rachel. How did you happen to make it down here today?
I work downtown, and we were watching out our window at work while the motorcade went by. So it was kind of cool, and I figured on my lunch I might as well walk down and check it out.
And you're a state worker, you told me, and so do you have something in particular that you're hoping that the president addresses when he speaks to the General Assembly today?
I hope that he can make some type of grounds to hopefully have everybody come to some type of budget.
And are you someone that has followed politics, or what are you thinking of the president, a sitting president, coming to the city of Springfield right now?
Well, I think it's very awesome. It's a big thing in the city today. I was able to see him when they opened up the library, and this is pretty cool.
All right, and how long are you going to stick? It's a bitter cold day out here. How long are you going to stick around?
Not too long. Have to go back to work.
Back to work. All right, thank you so much. I also ran into a woman named Anna. Anna, you're from Springfield as well?
Yes.
And what made you come down today?
My daughter told me if I don't get a picture for her, she's going to kick me.
So are you skipping? Were you home with her? Or
I was at work, so I got off for the day.
You got off for the entire day?
I'm here hanging out.
What do you do?
I work at a hotel.
And what is it? Is it about a sitting president? Is it this particular President Obama? Is it the state of the state right now, the state of the country? What are you interested in hearing from the president?
Not for sure. I mean, I just came down to hang out for the day and just hoping that everything gets done in order and we can all get together and figure out what we can do.
Yes, because not only the U.S. country, the Senate and the House of Representatives, excuse me, in Washington having difficulties, but of course here in the state having our own difficulties. How long are you going to stick around today?
Till he comes out.
Till he comes out?
Yep.
You know he's going to give a speech here in about a half hour inside. It could be a long wait.
I'll find a warm corner.
All right, Anna, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks.
So I did see some protesters down at the other end about a half a block away. Let's see, do they have there? It's hard to see down there right now. Looks like they've moved their banner, but some anti-Obama sentiment coming from that end. We're running into some walkers now and then, not a lot of people, but that may ramp up as the president talks about when that speech wraps up and he's about to leave the motorcade to go to in his motorcade to go to the Hoagland Center. So right now, pretty quiet on the outside. Back to you guys.
Okay, John Rieger reporting live right outside of the state capitol. As the gal he just interviewed said, she wanted a picture. She needed to get that picture. Well,
or she'll be kicked by her daughter.
I wasn't going to mention that part, but we want to hear from you. A lot of pictures I'm seeing on Twitter, on Facebook of fans of President Obama, or there were protesters as well. A lot of activity here in the state capitol. We want to hear from you. Send us your pictures, your videos, anything that you have, and use the hashtag president returns.
Absolutely. Some fantastic candid shots of people out the window seeing the president walk past.
Yeah.
Absolutely neat. We're going to take a look at some of those after the break, so keep them coming. We'd love to put them on air. We are approaching the president's speech. We've joked about this. What about locking the lawmakers in the chamber until they get something done? Guess
There
what?
they are.
The president made that happen. For an hour and 10 minutes now, they've been locked in the House chamber waiting for him to enter and address. You can see this live look of the Illinois State House chamber floor. This is from our pool feed as the lawmakers are eagerly awaiting the president's visit. Again, we are just about 15 minutes or so away, and we will carry it live in its entirety when we come back on News Channel 20.